Hi, this is Dr. Monica Agarwal. Welcome to another episode of Seeking Voices, exploring the science of health and healing. I had the pleasure of interviewing a pretty special woman. Her name is Amy Cameron O'Rourke. She's a dedicated care manager with a passion for helping people and their loved ones find peace and joy as they age. Amy is the author of The Fragile Years and the founder of O'Rourke and Associates, established in 1999. She believes our elder years can provide a beautiful opportunity for connection, meaning, and joy. Amy has over 40 years of experience as the owner of a care management company and an administrator in a life plan community. She has a master's degree in public health and a master's certificate in gerontology. She's spoken at TEDx Orlando. She's a featured expert in consumer reports. She has been on the Emmy-winning TV show on assisted living, Blindsided. She's also a frequent expert on articles, TV segments, and radio broadcasts. I came across Amy because I read her book, The Fragile Years. It provides information for people who need to help managing the care of their loved ones, defining the stage as the fragile years. It's an easy, accessible resource. It provides practical steps and clear insights on how to navigate the frustrating, complex systems, difficult choices, and emotional events. I really enjoyed speaking to Amy today. It's been a special experience to think about aging, how to age well, and how to provide seniors and our elderly parents with autonomy, honor them, but also keeping them safe. Please listen to my episode on aging and aging well and how to help our families in the fragile years. Hey there, it's so great to see you all today. I'm so excited about our next guest, Miss Amy O'Rourke. She is the author of The Fragile Years, Proven Strategies for the Care of Aging Loved Ones. I'm really excited to talk to you today. I have so many questions, and I know a lot of people in the audience are curious about aging and sort of working through their own aging process. Thank you so much for being here today, Miss Amy.
Well, thank you for asking me. It's a pleasure.
Oh, well, it's our pleasure. I would love to start by just chatting with you about, what aging is. Like, what do you see aging, and why did you call aging as your first chapter? You said, chapter one, a crisis for the aging like no other. Why is aging a crisis? And what do tell me about what you think about aging and what's happening in the world right now. The boomers are all aging. We know that the baby boomers are aging, and we have more boomers than we do any other population right now. Tell us what that's about, what you expect, and what's it like why do you call aging a crisis?
Well, number one, the numbers are driving the crisis, and finances or lack thereof is driving the crisis. So we have a lot of older adults that are getting older. They're entering the fragile years, which I'll explain further on in the podcast. And it's expensive. And so children, family members are taking care of the elder person, and they're losing time in work. They need to work full time. They lose their job. They quit their job to take care of their family member, and then their future is compromised. So it's got this cascading effects from one generation to another. And the other is that all the funding and attention goes to nursing homes. When people think of older people, they think nursing home. It's like 5% of the people that are over 65. It's a tiny little, but you see the horror stories in nursing homes and the funding in nursing homes and federal. Well, there's this huge gap of people that are just fragile, they're wobbly, they need a little bit of help, they can't afford the help, they might not know how to get the help that would prevent them from even going to institutionalization. And then the third thing is we have hospitals, treat, fix, cure. And then we have hospice, you're dying. And in the middle, it's what I call the leave me alone stage. It's like this really is my dream. Like we have a community or a facility or whatever, and it's just like a ward or a floor that you say, just leave me alone. If I don't want to eat, don't make me eat. Don't give me drugs to enhance my appetite. If I don't feel like getting up, it's like normal growing older, and people try to stop that with either a law or their own fear. And when I've been with older adults and they're in that mode, it's normal to not want to get up and go. Like you're losing energy. You have to think, well, do I want to go up and go to the bathroom or do I want to fix my coffee? Like that's normal because you start to pick and choose what you're doing based on your energy level. And we lose energy every decade of our life. And so it's a crisis around money. People are afraid to talk about money. They're afraid to talk about how much care costs. And the older adults' biggest fear is they don't want to run out of money before they die. And their thought process is the minute I start spending, if I can prevent that moment, I can hang on to my money longer. I just talked to a couple yesterday, and the man's 93. He's taking care of his 91-year-old wife. He just got out of the hospital having surgery, and he's taking care of her, and he didn't want to let go. Doesn't want to hire caregivers. He has what I would call a comfortable nest egg, not huge, but comfortable enough to hire people, but he was afraid to let go. And when we started talking about what happens if something happens to you, what happens when you fall on the floor, what happens when you get hospitalized, then you're really not going to be there for her. And it was a very intimate, meaningful conversation for me, but for him, I could see him letting that information in. One, I'm not a relative, I'm objective. And he could really let his guard down and let in, which is, denial. It's not that bad. I can really handle it. The 92-year-old is climbing up a ladder, fixing his roof. We got impaired judgment at this stage. We all have it, but it's really bad when you're in the 80s. And all that combined makes this a crisis that I'm not seeing in the government, in people's lives. There being some physical, systemic changes to help support this time of life. And we also have this anti-aging movement, which drives me crazy.
Oh, that's an exciting conversation. So, but at first I want to tease out what you said here. So couple points. You said only 5% of aging population is actually in nursing homes. Yet we actually, as the government, we give most of our funding to nursing homes, hospice, sort of end stage care, but that there's this middle zone of people that are maybe getting more frail, they're having more impaired judgment, but don't want to give up control. And what should we do about those people? And almost that's the sort of crisis that we have here, is that everything's costing more, people need more help. There's all these people and we don't know what to do with it. Does that sound about right?
It sounds about right. And the third funding that we do is we get these frail older adults in the hospital, and we do lots of surgeries and tests and treat, and that's very expensive and it's not really what they want. And so the conversation should be, where could we save money with the government, which is possible. We could save a lot of money with excessive use of Medicare dollars to fix, treat, cure, and move that money over to providing, assisted care, a little bit of care that would prevent the institutionalization by far. And that still, I've been in the business 40 years, that has not been addressed yet well in the country. And if we did, even the way hospice is funded, hospice gets paid a daily rate. They get a daily rate. And you could be in hospice in a nursing home and get hospice services. They get a daily rate. And then the nursing gets paid by day. That's about $20,000 a month. Right there, I could cut that in half. Why can't nursing homes do hospice care? That's their business. Why do we have to have a company come in? So things like that if you slash that and move those dollars over to help people stay at home longer, which is what people want to do, be in a less restrictive environment, have a program where you could get an aide, 4 hours a day, and maybe that would tide you over for longer and prevent that nursing home institutionalization.
Okay, so wow. So a lot here. So a lot to unpack. I guess I want to start with asking you the question about aging that you brought up when you talked to that man. Do you think people want, so I think you've established, and we can say safely, that as you age, you still want to keep control. Do you think that aging people want to talk about death? Do you think they want to do that? I mean, your experience, you work with people all the time who in this space, do they want to talk about their death and control their death? Because I think there's a lot of fear around your own death, right? And so do people really want to plan it out? And isn't the problem so much of the time that people don't plan out their death enough because we're not having the conversation enough, and that's why things are left for family to kind of pick up the pieces?
Well, it's interesting you say that. I see more older adults in the fragile years open up around they really want to be left alone. They don't want to, they want to die at home. They're very comfortable in my experience talking about death. And maybe it's because I'm not a family member. I have had the experience of, my mother and father were very reluctant, weren't eager, but we did it. But when you're non-related, I find them very, very ready. I had a client in the ambulance saying, I don't want to go. I want to be at home. Don't make them stop and get me out of here. And I did. Get her out of the ambulance, get her back in the house. So more often it's the disconnect between the family members in talking about it. And I think it's because there's not skills taught to learn how to do it. Where's your entry? Like, to me, there's entries all the time with an older adult because something will happen in their life. They might see someone not going to temple anymore. Maybe they used to see him at the grocery and they're not seeing him. They say, I wonder where that cute cashier went, or I wonder where my friend. And you say, what do you think happened to them? And how would you feel if something happened to you? Or, where do you want me to be in your life when you hit that stage? Or like, take an opening. My dad had his friend Walt went into the hospital, and my dad said he died by infection. He went into the hospital, they did surgery, and he got an infection and he died. And I said, Dad, if you go into the hospital, what should I be doing for you? And he opened up. He was disturbed enough to open up. So I don't have, and maybe it's because I have the skills to work through denial. I do think denial is there, and they put it off, money and death. But I think the family members are even harder to get through their own denial. I've seen more family members looking at their parent, and the parent's hunched over, they're on a walker, they're moving slower, and they want him to get better.
It's interesting. As you know, I'm a physician and I'm a cardiologist, so I take care of sometimes the sickest of the sick. And I have changed over the time as I've gotten older. I have changed my entire practice. I focus on prevention, but I'm also focused on getting people to a space to understand what they want. And so one of the conversations I have in my clinic, often if somebody is sort of 85 or 90 and above, and I say, have you decided what you want from your life? Like, I can do these tests for you, but do you want them? Because if I do, then it may lead to another one. What do you want to do with that? And that really has changed the conversation for me, and something that I encourage other people to do with their family members, to say, okay, if you go through this surgery, or if you do this, what's the next step? Or if you get this cancer treatment, do you understand what that means? And what if it doesn't work? What are you willing to do? Like, where are your thresholds and your parameters? And that's really helped. But I think as physicians, we're not taught well how to have these conversations. And so physicians also keep doing tests over and over, because we're almost taught to fix and make people better, and we're always just trying to make them better. But we don't realize that so much of the time we make people better by making them worse.
Right. It's I have a lot of empathy for physicians. I think the forces that they have to work against to do what they really love to do, it's so complicated now for them. But I think that, if the hospital's paying them, then they have an obligation to generate revenue. I think that's one complicating factor. I think the lack of skills in talking about when someone's fragile, you really do have to have a meaningful conversation, because it feels horrible when you do a surgery and they're worse and they don't get better. And then you have that nagging, why did I do that? Instead of having the conversation ahead of time. So I agree. And I applaud what you do in your practice, because so many more meaningful deaths occur when those conversations are had, because it's not bombarded by the medical system. It ends up being more peaceful, and everyone gets something out of it, and it's more real, and you don't have tubes to wade through to say goodbye.
It's actually quite beautiful. Some of the conversations when I have, and I bring them up to people, and I say, I think it's time to think about end of life care or hospice care, or what you want with the last time you have. it generates a lot of tears, but it also generates a peacefulness, which I think is really good. And I'm so glad that you brought that up. I want to switch topics a little bit, but not really. I want to talk about what the heck these words mean. Like, what are the fragile years, and how do we know when you're going into them? And does the person themselves know, or is it usually people around them that have to be cued into these fragile years? And are there stages to these fragile years?
Yeah, so I've had so many family members walk into my office and they've got this wide-eyed, I was not expecting this look on their face. And I'm thinking, what were you expecting? Like it's normal to me. And then I realized that this is a stage that I know that it wasn't in a book yet, but I realized they don't know, they're not expecting it. So it's a stage. And when you are around an older adult, you know they're entering it when you see their movement slow down in everything. The how quickly they eat their food, how fast they walk down the hall, how long it takes them to get dressed. Like you'll see that. And then you'll see them like they're not. So not doing as many things in the course of a day or a week than they used to do. You know, the woman that went to Bible study on Wednesday night, church on Saturday, church on Sunday is now only going to church on Sunday. They don't want to go to, might have gone to the grocery store 3 times a week. You get my point. So they're reducing the activity that they're doing. And these are the stages in the fragile years. Sometimes it started by like an event, a car accident, a fall, but a lot of times it's just this gradual slowing down, gradual maybe not wanting to go to the doctor, kind of ambivalent, don't really care. So you have the slowing down, you have the
Not caring as much.
not caring as much, and then a lot of life review, for lack of a better term, reminiscing, memories, start talking about, oh, I've heard stories from, elementary school, things their mother did for them, the smell of chocolate chip cookies in the kitchen. My dad was reminiscing about Aunt Maggie, who was a volunteer, and all the work that she did up until she was 90 years old. And you'll hear a lot of reminiscing. And then there's just a loss of independence. They need something there to help. And maybe it's taking out the garbage, maybe it's fixing the meal, maybe it's just a little bit during the day. And then there's I call it a soft place to land, where it's needing to be more. If it's at home and you can have assisted living at home, it's maybe 4 hours a day, 8 hours a day. Maybe it's in a community. I'm not against a community or for a community. And then the last stage is just a peaceful passing. And I think the end of life is like the last 3 years. That's my definition. It's not 6-month hospice rule. It's really the last 3 years. And I throw that, maybe for somebody it's 2, maybe somebody else it's 4. But it's like when someone gets pregnant, you buy the book, What to Expect When You're Expecting. That's what the fragile years is. Like menopause, terrible twos, midlife crisis, the fragile years. And so in that stage, there are things to not do to help enhance life at that stage. And most of it's active acute care. And that stage, every test should be questioned. Every procedure should be questioned, because to your point earlier, if we test positive on this, are you going to want to, if you do the swallow study, are you going to want a feeding tube? Are you going to want to go on thickened liquids? Is that concrete help that they need? And then how do you stay out of the hospital? It's a hard thing to do. Do you have a doctor's order that say, don't send me to the hospital? What doctor's going to do that? So the work becomes really knowing the people that you're caring for, and them knowing themselves, to be very active in managing the kind of care that person's receiving. And then the beautiful part is being there. Lots of family members say, they want to move quickly. They want to, get them moved. They want to do all these action steps, when the most important thing is just get there. Just emotionally get to where they are, which means you have to stop trying to get them to the gym or trying to get back to their former activity level. You want to go where they are, so you can support them in their journey.
Such an important point. And, I reflect on, my own family and my own patients, and we all kind of reflect. And I want everybody to do that who's listening, because I think that so much of the time we are trying to fix, and I'm a fixer. I mean, I'm a doctor. And so I'm always trying to make things better. And it's really hard to step away and say, maybe this is an unfixable situation, or that this is a situation that you don't want to fix. You have a quote in here. I have it notated on my book here, and I liked it. And so I thought I'd read it for the audience here. This is very common as older people enter the fragile years. They may see a physical therapist, but they're not interested in doing the exercises at home. The stretching and bending can be painful for them. And at this stage in life, they don't see that there will be any long-term rewards, or that they don't care about long-term rewards. My clients in this stage have told their children things like, I'm not entering any more marathons, and you go on about, about your dad and your process with your dad. But I thought I think the thing that I liked the most there was that maybe accepting that they aren't looking for they can't see the long-term rewards, and they don't care about the long-term rewards. And maybe that's the point we're all supposed to say, oh, I get it. Like they're done, or they are not interested in getting better. They're just accepting where they are. What would you say to that?
Well, I would say it's spot on. And I have so many experiences with watching people get there. The families kind of get to where the older adult is, where like they just don't want to mess with it anymore. So you have all the stages of grief, and that's how I like to think about the family members are in stages of grief: the denial, sadness, bargaining, acceptance, anger, and so is the older adult. And denial sometimes can be a very valuable mechanism, but it also has to be broken through. And so the family members might be in denial, and emotionally they have to get out of that to then experience the loss of their parent or their family member being how they used to be. They've changed, and it's painful. I've been there. I've watched it. It's painful. You've got your mother who was beautiful, fashionista, wearing all these beautiful clothes and nails done, and now she doesn't even want to wash her hair. And you don't want that to be true, because you don't want to lose them, because you're grieving and they don't want to go. So it's emotionally, and I'm a strong advocate of getting therapy, going with support, but really processing, because I've seen the benefits of when someone has their issues resolved and they're emotionally processing what's going on, they have a closer connection to the person that's going, and they can help them have the death that they want.
Yeah.
And that, I think, for me, is a goal for anybody with a family member.
I was reading The Comfort Crisis by Michael Easter, a great book, by the way. And one of the things, he goes to Bhutan, and he says, in Bhutan, he's meeting a monk I don't mean to butcher it as I simplify it and paraphrase it, but basically he says that in Bhutan, they kind of laugh at Americans, because Americans are so afraid to talk about death and their death. And that we in Bhutan, basically, we think of death as part of our life, like it's just a natural extension, and we just accept that it is part of who we are. And I think that that's very true, that Americans are afraid to talk about death. They're afraid to talk about their own death. It's almost like people feel like if they talk about their death, that they're going to will it to be so. And so it's like we're afraid to have those conversations. So actually, I have 3 kids, as I mentioned to you earlier. I've already started talking to them about death and my death, and that, eventually I will, but I want it to be a big party when we go, and what that looks like, and, and how that should be framed, because I don't want there to be such a fear of death that we all have in America. Do you think that's true, that Americans are afraid of death?
I think it's true that Americans are afraid of death. And I think if the top 5 fears were listed, it's either 1 or 2 talking about death. The other thing is, I think
the other one of the 1 or 2.
Public speaking. I think public speaking is actually the biggest fear. It could be, it's either 1 or 2. It's very funny. But yeah, the other thing is, like, it's very emotional. And there's a lot of defense mechanisms that keep people from those emotions. People go into control, they get angry, they go shopping, they drink, they do all these things that mask. And so it makes it even harder to even get to what their emotion is. And it's a very vulnerable state. And people have a different comfort level with that emotional state. And I had a few weeks ago, I met with a family. It was a brother and two sisters, and they were talking about their mother with such love. I mean, such love. It was palpable in the room. And as they were describing her, she was really at the end. And I said, I just love how much you love your mother. And I'm sure it's hard to see her die. And they lost it. They lost it. The brother was very apologetic, very embarrassed, and I said, my husband cries. And that is one of my favorite qualities because he's not afraid of his emotions. And that made it safe to experience. But I saw the difficulty in staying in the feeling of sadness.
Yeah. You referred to Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's 5 stages of death and dying. And I think that that's really apropos because it's almost like we have to go as the people that are going to be left. We have to go through those stages. And if we don't go through them or we get halted in one of those stages, right, that's when the whole thing breaks down, right? If we don't go through the process of accepting that our family member is going to die, and maybe that's what you did with that family there, is you allowed them to accept their emotion, but also accept the fact that this is the end. And maybe I love that you do that with people, and that you are a resource for people, and are so that people can come to you and sort of have those important conversations.
Yeah, and I know, and thank you for that. And it is very meaningful to me. It is very meaningful that I feel privileged and honored when they open up like that. And I know from experience that the memories that come from a real honest, open connection and really emotionally being there during the fragile years, those memories provide so much meaning for the rest of your life. I still draw on some beautiful memories of being with my mother. And it's not that we had a conversation, it was the feeling of being there. I still remember her fingers and her nails. And, I rubbed lotion on her nails, and she would just have this look on her face. This is still with me. It's 27 years ago. And
Wow.
it provides me with some comfort, and it's uncomplicated. It's not mired with regret, should have, would have, like it's not affected negatively because I got my own help from a therapist to really be there because her death was premature. She's only 66. And I didn't want it to be true, and it shouldn't have been true. And why is this happening? And I was so grateful for that help because then I could really be with my mother, and I could tell that I was a safe person for her because she could just be there dying, be comfortable in her own process of dying. And I didn't need to do anything except be of an emotional support just by my physical and emotional presence.
That's beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. Well, how does one prepare we have, a lot of us have very highly intelligent, highly financially sound parents who have been controlling things their whole life and are starting to enter those fragile years. How do we prepare our parents for this reality, maybe who aren't really ready for that or aren't really aware that they're entering the fragile years? How do we, as the children, help our parents get there?
So the first thing I will tell you is what not to do is there is no role reversal. There's never a reversal of roles. We never become our parents' parent.
So that's a very important comment that I want you to say again, because you say that in the book, because many of us in our generation will say, I just have more. My mother is like my third kid or whatever it is. And made a very important point to say that's not what's happening here.
It's not what's happening. And if you have children, think of it as your children telling you what to do and how that would feel. It's off-putting and you will get nowhere. But I think it happens because there's not lessons and education around what is this role? I don't know how to be. So I'm just going to pick up a role I know, and that's what I'm going to do, because you don't know how to become a partner. You don't know how to become a collaborator. You don't know how to walk alongside while they're in it. And that is a skill that comes with time and small doses of sharing of information, and then sharing of, and I'll give an example. Think and watch and observe. And if you don't spend physical time with your parents, spend that time way before you think it's needed. Because if you come when they need it, they'll think you're coming because they're ready to die. Like, why is she here? I don't want to. But it would be, does she have difficulty or he have difficulty walking to the mailbox to get all their publisher's clearinghouse stuff? Do they have trouble getting gas for the car, buttering the toast in the morning? Notice what
you may see that as the child, but how do you get the parent to see that?
you don't try to get them anywhere. You ask a lot of questions to get where they are, and that will help them get into reality. And sometimes hiring an outside professional, and I use the profession of care management, aginglifecare.org, sometimes having a professional have a conversation where you're not a part of it. There's some things you just might not be comfortable talking to your child about. It's like not comfortable, but maybe they get started with somebody else. Maybe it's a social worker at their, support center. Maybe it's the person at the golf shop that has a great rapport with them. Maybe somebody in there that can ask questions so they can feel where they are. And, parents have a right to make bad decisions. And sometimes you can't get them there. And I want to let people know that sometimes you can't, you got to wait for the crisis. You got to wait for them to go in the hospital. You got to wait for them to fall. You got to wait. And you don't want to do that. But asking questions like, what would be the biggest mistake I could make when you need help? What would I do wrong? What do you think about what happened to Aunt Alice? Like, if you can't make it up those stairs, you want me to build a ramp or anything? Not that you need it now, but is that something you'd see me doing? Just you get the feel of that, where you're trying to get where they are, and then the other questions you would start asking. If mom is fine and you go to the hospital, or mom has a memory deficit and you go to the hospital, what do you want me to do with mom?
Yeah.
I'm not ready to talk about it now, but when do you see us talking about the finances and me being a decision maker, or someone being a decision maker, if you're not able to? I want to be what you want me to be at the time is needed.
That's wonderful. I mean, those are great points. So, I think importantly, what comes to me for this is that, number one, our parents are not our second, third, and fourth children, or whatever it may be. They are the people that raised us, and they're entitled to that dignity. And then teaching them to, or maybe not teaching anything, but having a conversation to say, does this make, how can I honor you, is really good. And also pointing out that maybe sometimes it's going to take that event to get that parent where you think they need to be emotionally, and maybe they're going to have to go through some sort of crisis, and that's okay too, because that's just their process.
Yeah, and I've worked with a lot of family members and gotten them to just, they're in that control mode of wanting to get them to do what they need to do, and they're right, but it's not going to happen. To get their own plan together for themselves, like in the crisis, what do you need to know? I need to know what hospice is. I need to know what Medicare is. I need to know the hospital. There's lots of systems that you can just get educated on, so when the crisis hits, you're ready to go. And sometimes that offers a tremendous amount of relief if you can't get the parent to do what you think they should do. And if they don't want to do what you think they should do, they have that right.
Yeah, and that's probably maybe the hardest thing the child generation, as it were, is going to struggle with or does struggle with, right? It's that you can see things maybe more clearly, maybe, or maybe from your opinion and from your vision point, you seem to know, you seem to think that they may be better. So to that, but they don't agree, and that's got to be okay. And that's a hard one, I think. And, because there's another sort of concept along with that, which is, there are a lot of parents who want to age in place, and there's a lot of data that talks about aging in place and how that's better for people and for seniors to age in place. But that aging in place may not be the safest option for a parent. Then what to do? Like, how do you get the parent there? And maybe you don't. Maybe what you're saying is you don't always get the parent there, and it's just what it is.
Yeah, and I think when I think about the audience listening, if I'm making recommendations and you haven't been able to make that work, that's okay. Because if I know one thing, not one thing will work for everyone. These are commonalities. So, and when it works beautifully. But if you've not been able, I don't want anyone to feel guilty, wrong, bad, that they have not been able to make this work, because that's, sometimes all you can do. And I think the hardest part with a parent, there's impaired judgment, which I think all of us have. All of us have, like, especially after 40, your mind wants to do something that your body will not be able to do anymore. And it's hard to accept that. And we all have impaired judgment. And so at this stage, there's that impaired judgment, but they have capacity, if you will. They're alert, they're paying their bills, they're doing, but they don't have the best judgment. And so I like to approach it with emotional honesty. It creates a lot of stress for me watching you and imagining that you're going to fall and break a hip. I'm having a heart. You're doing what you want to do, and I don't want to control you. But just so as the family member, this is making me really nervous. And that's all you can do. And then it takes the pressure cooker off, because sometimes the parent doesn't realize what's happening to the children. Sometimes they don't care. But either way, you keep your own self clear. And if it's not received, that's okay. Tell somebody else every time you need to how frustrating it is. Otherwise, you're just going to lash out in anger, and then you're 5 steps back from where you were, and now they're mad at you for yelling at them. Like.
So it's a fascinating process. So I wanted to read another quote from your book here that I liked, and it goes to my next question, which is about how do we make peace with the aging and dying process? And that's sort of somewhat you've already alluded to, but I like this section here. It says, the hairy daughter who was worn out from caring for her mother and worrying about her sat down. She was eager to get her mother moved so she could return to her job and life. Nothing was said for a few seconds as we took in the importance of the moment. Finally, her mother looked at her and said, I'm ready to go when the time comes. The daughter burst into sobs and tears. We sat for a few more minutes, not rushing it, willing time to slow down. That moment has stayed with me, and I hope the daughter has had the same experience. It is beautiful when a loved one has a moment of clarity like that. Those are the experiences that lift my heart and sustain me in my work.
Well, I remember the house. I remember the living room. I remember the street it was on. And that experience is still with me. And I'm glad you read that again, because when those moments happen and the daughter just let go, she didn't jump into the trap of, Mom, no, it's okay. And you're going to get it. And you're going to beat this thing and you're going to fight this. She stopped. And I still get choked up when I think about that. And there's, hundreds of other experiences that if I started talking about it would still come back to me.
Maybe that's the part about people who are dying young in our lives too, that is sort of appreciating that maybe they won't beat it and that it's okay, and that sort of give them the peace and quiet and space to let it be okay and not try to change it and not try to fix it. And that's so hard.
Well, we were talking earlier about my sister who died last summer at 69, and it was sudden, and she, was diagnosed and gone in 30 days. And I'm a professional in the field, and my two sisters were in charge. I wasn't in charge. And that was the greatest gift I ever got from whatever you believe in the universe, because I had to do my own work without being in control, thinking I could run things, which none of us could anyway. And she didn't die the death that I want for myself. But because I wasn't in charge, I could get help to see how she wanted to die, which was 15 people in the room talking out loud, trying to do everything she could to get better. And I could be with her in every moment for what it was for her once I let go of how I wanted her to die. It wasn't my call. And once I got there, I have those memories and I have acceptance of she's who she is or was, and I'm who I am.
So hard. It's so hard. It's hard to hear you talk about. Thank you for sharing about your sister, because I'm sure that hits home for a lot of people. I think that giving up the conception or preconceived notion of what we think that death should look like, or that you should have given everything to it, and maybe accepting that this isn't your decision and it's their decision, is a hard and important step. You have a section in here that I wrote down here, and I have all these little bolds, and I hope you know that, and hope that gives you pride, to know that I really liked this book. I've got all these little things.